Star Wars The Old Republic. What is Star Wars The Old Republic? The game was an ambitious project in the Star Wars universe that brought graphics and the Star Wars brand and storytelling to the forefront of the selling point to the next best thing MMO-wise. However, due to the missteps and further issues with the core gameplay loops and issues like communication delays between what the community wants and what the developer wants make and ultimately led to the eventual fall in popularity of the game over the years. The game eventually has gone into a limbo state where the game is in the near brink of dying of profitability, and now the question of how long the game will last before being shut down. The Star Wars The Old Republic came out in 2011, and other popular MMOs of the past, like World of Warcraft coming out in 2004 and RuneScape coming out in 2001. What did The Old Republic do that was different to other popular MMOs of the past to stand above the rest? The main point and story and dialogue options of choice-based consequences of the Star Wars aesthetic and branding, finally graphics for the MMO that very much seemed very good to look at. But what happened between 2011 and 2019 for the game to become the fastest subscribed game to now barely a managed remnant shadow of the former self of the game for it to fall so far? Well, here at Game Studies, I'm going to explore and reveal some personal experiences and of the game and wonder for the future, and finally I will sum up some lessons to be learned about this game to figure out where exactly the game genre goes from here. Let's talk about the business model of the game. The game initially came out as a subscriber paid subscription kind of game. As the game trailers came out, the impression it gave was that it would be something big. I guess the marketing for the game had a big budget, but it's difficult to say for sure. What I can say for sure is that when the game came close to release, it was going to be a game that people were going to pre-order. It was in the understanding that something Star Wars was coming out, and this would be interesting. When you think about it from a Star Wars fan idea of what was going on, Star Wars Episode 7 was still not come out till late 2015, and Star Wars Episode 3 ended all the way back in 2005. So it would be a 6-year gap for anything major to be going on Star Wars related. Star Wars Clone Wars was still going on at the time, but ended back in 2014, and was sort of reminiscent of Star Wars Episode 2 and Star Wars Episode 3 for fans that wanted official content. In the video games world, Star Wars The Force Unleashed was an interesting story and game mechanics that came out in 2010. Interesting, but with the ending of the first Force Unleashed, it very much seemed like a sequel was very much unneeded story-wise. The interesting Star Wars game like Star Wars Republic Commando or Star Wars Knights of the Republic or Republic 2 or Jedi Academy or Jedi Outcast finally Star Wars Battlefront 2 came out during the peak moments of the Star Wars prequel era. So it was interesting 5 years or so later that something would tell a story in the Star Wars universe to reignite the interest in the Star Wars universe. Let's not forget the elephant in the room, Star Wars Galaxy, that eventually closed in December 2011. The game was an interesting attempt at an MMO franchise, but forgot many core elements that eventually led to the game's demise. I guess this will be something for another video, in a way. The game looked something special using a Star Wars soundtrack that seemed cinematic in presentation. Unfortunately, the period between December 2011 and early 2012 would bring up issues that the game would be unforeseen. Many of the issues in the MMO were present, but still such issues would be a fault of the rollout time behind response of the community and reaction to the devs that would eventually result in the drastic decline of the player base. The game, when you start up with the character selection, setting up the player avatar and finally the class. In terms of customization, it was alright, but nothing to the levels of Sims or later Black Desert Online of an interesting customization. The look of the game gave the style of something sort of cartoony compared to other popular MMOs. It was still very much looked better. Compared to RuneScape, yes, even World of Warcraft very much notches ahead. The problem from the onset issue of the game was very much here of the game. The Old Republic had this issue that the game, like a single player focus when a community focused on tools that don't really work together. The Old Republic had the issue making the game like a single player focused game but with a community focused tools that don't work together. What do I mean by this? In the game, you have to choose a side, Decision and Division 1. Then you have to select a class that draws your interest and look good. Last and very much later on the game, specialization of that game again into 2. So what's the issue? The game the people play understand the stories do not necessarily go well with the fact that later on, more teams and guild-based focus, the game's players may need to be forced to play classes or characters with stories you do not necessarily care about. What is meant by this? When I first played the game, I was under the impression that I would experience the game itself and the characters within as well as it being a social game. The problem is inherent in the class system of the game. Other games like Final Fantasy Online or the benefit of allowing one character to play multiple classes on a single switch of a class. The Old Republic, on the other hand, forces one to restart the game from the start to keep grinding. Interesting concept, but it would be a while for MMOs to get rid of this and restart the specking and specialization. I'm not sure of if it came to the Secret World many years later on. The issue with the Old Republic is the grinding, getting better gear, farming for money are all tasks that appear on the surface easy, but inherently are just things you do that are easy but are grindy, and that is inherent in the game itself. So what is meant by this? The problem with the game is that it's playing for a story is not motivation enough to start a new class to reach interesting parts of the game. Some may say that the journey is what makes the game interesting, not the destination, but I guess it's a matter of taste. What is meant by this? I myself am a gamer of mechanics, not really aesthetics. I guess playing the Old Republic reminds me of a cue that other games that do better in certain things in retrospects. Playing the Old Republic back in the day, reaching that level gap took time and real dedication to get to, and realizing that late game content basically invalidated how you were supposed to play made the game an unnecessary grind experience that was simply not fun. The old age about MMOs are classes. Typically in the game, there are main classes, DPS, tanks, and healers. The problem is that altogether, healers are supposed to be important in every MMO, but no one plays that class typically. So the issue becomes when you separate the game from the mindless grind to actually strategizing, customized gear, and playing seriously, the game becomes a challenge. Unfortunately, the game does not specialize much in terms of catering to a casual audience or the hardcore audience. Casual audience wants to get through the story, do some interesting tasks here and there, and possibly trying to get new things. The issue in the order to be interesting and doing stuff that actual missions of the game are just not interesting, and the story of the game itself, although interesting to have dark side and light side options, had the issue of the game typically one of two ways. The casual audience are not going to go through a whole set of mindless tasks to play stories that seem mediocre at best and will simply move on to the next game. The hardcore audience, on the other hand, had this issue of guild forming and applying to the guilds and gear building that seem subpar at best compared to other MMOs like EVE. It really seems like in the Old Republic seems to stand with no innovation towards the thought process of the accumulation of wealth. What about PvP? Unfortunately, the PvP in the Old Republic had the issue of not being focused. The challenges are randomized. There are no team-based combat matches to focus on the competitive side or the gear or class selection for PvP at different focus compared to PvE. What about PvE? Unfortunately, there are large amounts of raids and called heroics that had the issues of being too difficult, being very much with little or interesting gear to make the experience rewarding. Simply put, the idea of putting statistics and item drops that are randomized to different classes in the mechanics that forces unneeded grinding and grinding that feels unrewarding after a while based on passive nature of the gear in the game. The combination of the issues in the game was very much present that plagued other MMOs, but unfortunately it was something that after the initial release, it would be very much later in the release of the Knights of the Fallen Empire where the expansion packs were significant. Sure, the Shadows of Revan seemed interesting, but marketing for that show did not signify a interesting marketing. It was simply put that it would be a whole year in 2013 before anything significant for the game would happen, which meant that the game's progress is very much moved at a pace that slowly eventually halted after the DLC in 2016. What happened? The problem with the Old Republic is that people wanted to experience a new story told via the Star Wars universe, but the added fact that the dialogue and the significant story that mattered were not really present in the game. People don't want to grind mindlessly for hours on end with a marginal return in rewards to play Star Wars that was subpar at best. The people do not want to embrace the side of better loot, better practice did not signify that. Other PvP games like MOBAs have tight contained focus which has a balance and game time that signify the practice and repetition, but it becomes more better through a ranking system. The PvE side of things forced a social aspect of the serious-minded to become the elite and shunned those with subpar game knowledge to know what was truly going on. The market side of things made the player economy lackluster at best and delved into the issue of making money that was either pointless or generating gear, a matter of experience as such in PvP. A year in gamer time is an eternity, and the Old Republic adapted too slow to the changing sides, and unfortunately, with the 6 new expansion packs added to the game, did not change the fact that the audience for the Old Republic had already left. The Old Republic is an ambitious project by EA, where the time and the pop culture interest and experimentation with different mechanics and aesthetics of the Star Wars brand became a project within itself to see if it could top the King MMO World of Warcraft. Unfortunately, due to lack of foresight, differentiating itself to its significance and mechanics and innovation lacked an overall flair and the community where other MMOs thrived. It would be interesting for an MMO genre to see how the budgets of MMO make the playability of such games a dying breed, with a more distracted world wanting more tighter mechanics, interesting gameplay within a tight minutes of MMO timeframes with a consistent subscription model makes the gaming a new type of brand of how one experiences games, in a way.